Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to everybody at CAIS for putting this event on. For me personally, this is the first time I think I've ever really got to talk about my research interests and where it's situated at the present time. And that's been a journey just to kind of get to where I am today. So as I kind of go through this and stumble through it here today, I'm really excited to talk with all of you about, and answer any questions that you might have about, what I can consider for my research down the line. So to get started here, I would say broadly speaking, my research is situated within the information practices of individuals with fibromyalgia. As a very broad overview, fibromyalgia is a very contested, invisible illness, primarily described as chronic pain throughout the body with really no ongoing medical explanation. It's a condition near to me as my partner suffers from it and has for about 18 to 20 years now-ish. So when I think about my research, I think about Tammy Oliphant's kind of call to action in one of her more recent publications. And she talks about this concept of epistemic injustice, and she calls on the LIS field to explore the relationship between information and identity formation and the ways that we can identify and correct prejudicial credibility deficits. So when I started thinking about individuals with fibromyalgia and the fact that their illness is contested, I really started to uncover that my research really wasn't about their information practices so much as it is these, things that are under the surface that really influence kind of their identities and how they interact with the world around them. The first one is hierarchies of power. We've talked Brown and Vanoa in LAS have talked a lot about this, and they have a really good, they really tie in Foucault, which I've been able to expose myself to a little bit more over the last little bit. And I'm really interested, I guess, in this kind of subset of, how the medical system itself is set up as the authority on all things health. However, when there's a tension between something that is contested or that the medical community hasn't accepted, it's, who ultimately is the knower in those situations, and where do people turn when they have an illness that isn't accepted by this medical community for information? Do they engage with communities of like-minded individuals? And how do those individuals come together? I'm also very interested in stigma and the sick role. This is something that has really, when I think about the personal experiences and that we've encountered, my partner often has to put on a performance. She has to act the role of a healthy person in order to avoid stigma. Stigma really influences social relationships and social interactions. I think a lot about in kind of this field here, I think a lot about how people often will volunteer and provide information to a sick person as if they are in need of it. And what they do is they systematically kind of make the role of pain mundane. They treat it as a symptom, and it's pain is something that almost everybody has experienced throughout their life. So they use their experience with pain to, basically put themselves in a position of power over the person with fibromyalgia to say, hey, this is how I got rid of my pain. And those interactions can be quite traumatizing to those individuals. And I also, on this note, I think a lot about performance. And this is something that I've had to learn as somebody who doesn't have fibromyalgia, or as Goffman describes me as a normal. The need to perform, to hide that illness. And I wonder how that desire and that need to perform, interacts as a way of information control. and whether that performance even kind of bleeds into how people with fibro interact with information. And then finally, the last point that I'm really interested in is kind of the embodiment of pain. And this is very similar to embodied information. And I mean, this is very directly related to hierarchies of power as well. In a lot of situations, I love this quote from the one study I read where an individual says, "I'm the only person who knows what it feels like to be ill and what is good for my body. I don't like other people to tell me and to control me." And it's really interesting in this interplay between, this illness is very contested. A lot of medical interactions result in people feeling like they're not being believed, they're being delegitimized by the medical community. However, the medical community is also an authority of, what is best for the body. So there's this really weird tension that happens. And, this quote from Chen, who directly studied kind of embodied information practices of people with fibro, they utilize their bodily sensations as information, including the learning of triggers and learning to reinterpret their bodily sensations. So when I think about that quote, I really think about how, when we try to map out the information practices of somebody, it's how often, pain, the potential for pain, in what decisions does a person with fibro make where pain is part of that decision-making process or part of that informational process that they go through. And, for a lot of people with fibro, I would expect that, the decision of how much pain am I in or how much pain am I going to be in is part of pretty much everyday and everyday decisions that we take for granted, whether that's getting out of bed and going to brush our teeth or having a shower can be an extremely difficult endeavor for people with fibromyalgia, as an example. So it's how are these decisions made? How are they part of the information process of individuals? And I would say kind of more holistically, I think about the models of information practice that exist kind of as they are right now. And I wonder to myself whether, there's this kind of this theme that I'm thinking of that needs to sit out, no matter what the model is or what the process a person goes through as they interact, seek, evaluate, and use information. There's this thing that's sitting on top of it that is, these hierarchies of power and the stigma and the sick role that, no matter what the process is, it's these things that are going to influence, impact, their information processes every step of the way. So I apologize if that felt maybe a little disjointed or all over the place, but like I said, this is the first time I've kind of had the opportunity to go through this. So I'm excited to, when a time comes, answer any questions or expand on any thoughts and ideas.
Thank you so much, Kevin.